Thank you for having me. Gonna get some mood lighting going on. Sorry for the delay. So I am Nate. I work at a company called Vitals in New York. We also have offices in Massachusetts and Tulsa. And I'm the lead on the UX project there for the Vitals Choice project. So we do an Angular app that we're looking at moving over to Angular 2.0. So we sell the app to different healthcare companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield, North Carolina, HCSC, Humana, and clients like that to find doctors and hospitals, and then rate them and kind of have transparency around what the doctors are doing to empower the users. So it was a pretty large-scale app, and it's actually part of the reason why I'm doing this presentation today, just to kind of do a shameless plug and throw out that we're looking for a UX person to join our remote team within the next 2 or 3 months to help with the rewrite.
Are you based in Knoxville?
Yeah, I'm in Knoxville. So
Okay, cool.
I did go up there. I stayed there for about a year and then moved back, and they were cool enough to let me work remote from Knoxville.
Cool.
So what I'm showing today is a couple of programs that I've been working on in my spare time, not related to healthcare. The first one is a file sync application that I had written in C# initially, and as I wrote it, I was kind of learning C#, and the thing that I really took away from it was accessing the file system was really easy, and I felt like doing things like working with Windows registry was easy to do, and I liked it overall, but I didn't like the UI of it. I didn't like WinForms and having to deal with that. It just kind of seemed counterproductive when you're coming from working in HTML and CSS and being able to like mock up things really quickly of how you want them to look. So I went to a conference in San Francisco called Angular U, and it kind of inspired me after learning about, I think it was learning about the native script. That kind of got me thinking about, oh, well, you know, why not do these things in JavaScript as well? So I found something called Node-webkit. Have you guys heard of Node-webkit before? Pull it up. And basically what it lets you do is just start up a Node server, and you can kind of run your client-side code and your Node code side by side, so you can have access to the file system on Windows. Not really quite as mature for doing tasks like that as C#, I feel like, but definitely enough to do some things. So I'll go ahead and start looking through the code of that application. So you have a package.json file that I guess is your...
Can you increase the font?
Yeah. You have a... Is that good?
Yeah.
Good. The package.json file, you can define things like if you wanted to start out full screen, how you would want the width and the height to be, the max width and height of the viewport, things like that. If you want a toolbar in there, say you log and check your console, because it looks cooler not adding a toolbar in there, it looks more like a real application. Then you can set the icon. If you wanted to have it run in your taskbar, you can set an icon for things like that. And then of course, you know, like your dependencies like Bower, Express, things like that. Go ahead and open up the app. So when I open it up, it's going to authenticate me through my Google account. Log in. It's authenticating me through the Google API, and it's just reading my file system. So I built a kind of a directory parser here in the code. Probably a little bit too much in the controller of this. It got a little bit bulky, so I kind of like to refactor a lot of this out and put it into the file service. Just doing things like using the file service to read the files. I want to go back in directory, watching watching the files after you read them from the directory in Node. And then it also interacts with Google API where it's watching the files when you upload them. So it makes an array of remote files as well, and it's keeping track of both your local files and your Google Drive files at all times. It's different functions like that. So you can see that it's in the taskbar now. You can go ahead and open it back up. And so if I wanted to, say the workflow would be if I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose this important file. So I would go in here to the file sync program, upload it. Now have indication that that file has been saved to my drive. So here in my Google Drive, you have it saved. So I think if I save this, if I do some more changes to it, you should see it read. So restart the program, it's still showing the file is synced. Actually, yeah, that's why I didn't do it. Changes here, just looking at that particular file name. You should see it. Yeah, actually, just going to recreate it, I think. Still kind of working that out. So basically just kind of keeping things up to date. It uses the Node file watching system. Put in the file service over here. And yeah, it's when you watch the file, it's actually saving the file name to the user settings file as a JSON configuration file. And then it will rerun the file watcher, run those through, and then Node is watching that if the application is open. So you make a change, if you're to create a new file, or make any sort of modification, it's going to automatically upload. So there's a few bugs with it. I had to restart the program. But the basic idea is there. And also there's some things like, say, I want to watch all of these files. I put in a little function to watch the entire directory. So Angular knows when all the files in the directory have been synced to Google Drive. You can see them in here. It knows that the directory is watched. So definitely want to flesh it out a little bit more, but I think it's a start.
So that's an Angular app?
Yes.
Okay. So with Node-webkit, it just gives you, you just pull down Node modules and you can reference them directly inside.
Yeah. It's if you look at the code, it's actually I've injected Node, so I'm using require within the Angular file service. So I thought that was pretty cool to kind of mix them together and be able to use file system stuff and Node stuff along with the modularity of Angular. So I'd also like to kind of rewrite this in Angular 2 or do another application in Angular 2, which really componentized and see how they would work together with that. Another thing is you can define a file as your main, which is like the first thing that it loads when you load the application. So in here, just running a script, and this is a way that you can call a server programmatically from an index file. So it loads up, then it's programmatically calling server.js, redirecting me to localhost 3000. And I actually had to do this to get around the restriction with Google Drive API because by default, Node-webkit uses like the file // convention, and Google API won't accept that as a header or, like, won't accept it when you're making a request. So it had to be localhost. I had to refer to that and be served from a Node server. And then this is just starting the server using Express on the localhost 3000. Another thing that I kind of tried out, this was completely new to me, was using the Google Web Components, Google Material Design Lite. And I kind of had mixed feelings on it, at least when working with Angular. Some of the two-way binding didn't really seem to work well with material design. It didn't really pick up changes in class. If you want to interpolate like an Angular function, double curly braces within a class, it didn't really seem to pick that up very well. But I just kind of took this template from the Google Material Design website and modified it for my purposes. Like for the header, which has, I think, the directory, maybe it was over here. Just use the directive for that. Anyway, and then just use router for the rest of the app. It's been a while. Yeah, here with the router just kind of going on that / convention, or up that convention. So. Like if you wanted to come in here, this shows the complete list of all the files that you're watching. You could click stop watching and it will remove it. So you'd still have it on your local host, but then you would also have it on your remote file, but it would stop actually updating it. So at that point, you're kind of not watching that anymore. And then there's a run in the background link to send it back down to the tray. And that was included. Put a little bootstrap in here. This stuff is native to Node-webkit, I believe. So this is just a little snippet of code. When you minimize it, this logic is done. Another thing that I thought would be really cool that I'd like to implement is, as you update a file, say you go on here and say blah blah blah, whatever. You could have the functionality of a window popping up and saying what file it is that's syncing to Google Drive. So that way you wouldn't just kind of have to guess. You would have notification that it was going on and that sort of thing. But a little bit more unwieldy than I would like to have been at this point. So I'd really like to refactor it and probably take out the user options file and then just have it completely dependent on the state of Google Drive API, like pulling that down and then matching it up against the file system. I think that would be a lot cleaner than trying to look through this user file and have that third option. So, gonna look at that eventually, and I think this is really about it.
Is this a GitHub project or anything we could look at, or is this?
No, it isn't yet. But actually, I can push up what I have, and then I'll post it in the meetup after tonight. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Have you tried porting it over and seeing if it runs well on Linux or OS X?
I haven't. I would really like to, and I don't have a Mac, so I'm hoping to get a Mac from my company within like the next couple of months. So at that point, I would move it over. I'm sure the thing that I was kind of worried about with that, let me find the file service. The drive system, in order to read like CDE drive, it has different code depending on whether you're on Mac or PC. So you don't even have like C drive on the Mac, do you? And then on Linux, what are the conventions, just like slash
user slash.
Yeah. So you would probably have to sniff the operating system, and then it would branch out and read that initial CED drive. But if not, I guess you would just be restricted to one drive on the like the default drive or whatever. Yeah.
Consistent between all the operating systems is the shortcut for the home directory, so you always have to do a tilde
Oh.
to get to the home directory for that user. That'll be across all the operating systems.
Okay.
That's one option for that.
I didn't know.
And Node abstracts the file system for you too, so you have some common things you can do, like the tilde, things like that, so that you don't have to worry about operating specific things too. So
Cool. Yeah, I worked with Node. Actually, the other project that I'm going to be showing uses Node as well. But I'd really like to get some more like production Node experience and work on something a little bit larger in a corporate type setting, because it's really fun. It's really lightweight and nimble. But yeah, I feel like if I worked in a little bit more, I'd probably know the tilde trick and things like that.
did you consider Electron at all as opposed to Node-webkit?
No, I wasn't aware of it. So I kind of looked around. I think there's also, what are some of the other options available, like Chromium?
Yeah, well, you can create plugins for Chrome, which is kind of different from the standalone things you can create with Node-webkit and Electron. Chrome, that's like a plugin, that's an add-in to Chrome itself.
Yeah, so you'd be dependent on Chrome. I think Node-webkit actually uses Chrome as the browser, or Chromium as the browser.
Well, it's the engine, the V8 engine that it's using, I believe. So it's not, you don't have to have Chrome on your machine to run this, I believe.
Yeah, it must come with it kind of prepackaged inside of the app. So just real briefly, the shortcut of how you actually run this is just Node-webkit and then the directory of the application. And then there are ways that you can compile it to an exe file, or whatever the Mac executable or Linux executable is. I tried doing that. I didn't really have any luck off the bat for Windows, so might be in the funky loader HTML server thing that I've got going on that might be messing with it. But overall, I would use Node-webkit again. Seemed like a really good way to do cross-platform, and I was pretty encouraged by what I saw.
And Electron is a good option as well. We're looking at some internal projects we're doing with Electron. Again, it's for cross-platform. It's basically a Node application that's bundled together and can be installed on a user's machine.
You're running Atom, right? Is that Atom?
No, that's Sublime.
Oh, okay, Sublime, sorry.
Yeah, I have a colleague who uses Atom, and
Yeah.
he really likes it.
That's what Atom shell, Electron has been extracted out of Atom shell.
Okay.
It's basically desktop version of WebKit, essentially, is what it is. I mean,
So with Electron and with your app, within that frame, you have an HTML web page.
Yeah.
So if you were to attach to like a mouse move event, do you only get within that frame, or is it possible to identify things like idle? Because one of the things I'm looking at for our company, we have a kiosk. When a visitor enters the lobby, we want them to be able to message a person in the office. So what I was thinking is we could synchronize, if that person is at their desk, everyone could log into like a Meteor app or something like that that would synchronize status. But in order to do that, you wouldn't be able to have this app be in focus at all times to capture that mouse move.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you would be able to capture that either with just vanilla JavaScript. Was it like tab index? Is that what you use to
Well, there's also events in Node-webkit and Electron that, like when the app starts, when it's minimized, and there's definitely events that are outside of just the browser. What you're showing in a Node-webkit or an Electron application is a web browser embedded in an application, right? So there's kind of meta events that you can capture.
That Node has added
Right.
on top of what I'm used to.
Well,
within it.
yeah, the Node-webkit and Electron have added those events.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what you're seeing right there is
Right.
that's like a part of the Node-webkit extras that you get with the hardware or like the more low level stuff. But as far as I can tell, it's just a browser. That's all it is. It's pretty much just a browser. So if it works in Chrome, I really doubt that it wouldn't work in Node-webkit.
Yeah, so the worry is just that like the events would be happening outside of what Chrome would control. So I'll look into what Electron and Node-webkit have added in addition to this.
Yeah, I'd like to check out Electron now.
We have a client project that we're doing in Electron, and it's actually an embedded system, which is kind of cool.
You can ultimately do, even if it couldn't understand, because you're controlling nodes, so you can communicate with the file system. So if you had another process that was running, you can talk to that process. You can, it's running Chromium, so you can write like Chrome style extensions. And again, if you want to communicate with the base system, you can do it.
Think of it more like a Node app that's running a web browser.
The hope was they would all be self-contained. I wouldn't have to have an additional process to monitor idle status.
So at that point, you would have Node-webkit or Electron running, and then you would have a Chromium app within. So it would be like an app within an app.
And worst comes to worst, you could actually do native modules within a Node app too. So if you were just deploying up Windows or a Linux system or whatever, you could write a native module, include that in your project, and that could monitor whatever processes you need. So
brush up on your C.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
But I will note that I know for at least Electron it has a kiosk mode. So
Oh, okay.
I might investigate that.
Nice.
Might I also add that working with Google Drive API is not fun. I didn't care for it. Parsing through the directory structure is awful. They use, rather than, like a hierarchical structure, everything seems to be flat, and then it's ID. You just have to look through ID, and then I was having to do checking the name against each other. So eventually what I did is I just identified it as the entire directory as a string and just looked at the directory name with the file name against the Google Drive.
Azure blob storage is the same model. It's not really hierarchical as you would think in regular drive systems. So that's probably common across blob storage.
Well, it was fine until I tried to make multiple files upload at one time. And then it was like working with the callback of trying to do that and then parsing through all the child IDs. When you get into 5 directories deep, it was just too much. And I wanted to focus more on just getting it working and have a prototype of it and have the end result while not trying to fight Google API. So I thought it would also be cool to have different modules where you can maybe plug in your what is that application called? Dropbox. Like maybe put in your Dropbox credentials and authenticate through that, and you can use different ones. But just another idea for the use of it. And I'm sure that there's something else out there that already does this, but just kind of interested in it. I haven't really heard of anything like Dropbox. I think the limitation with that is that when you save it has to be in the Dropbox directory. Like you can't, I guess you could do a symlink or something to the Dropbox directory, but you have to have it within there. But unless you're able to keep your files in the same structure that it's in. So it's just kind of like click it, watch it, and then the idea is to keep it completely synchronized. So I think that's about all I have for that. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you do the, the icons, the UI for where you drag and select? It's like the actual file system kind of.
Oh, I'm not sure that I'm actually doing that. Are you?
Oh, or
Exactly. Yeah, there's no drag and drop. It's more or less just you find a file, you say, oh, I want to sync that, and make sure that you watch it, and then it shows you an indication. And then if you were to reload it, it's reading it off of configuration and Google Drive and syncing it based on that.
And that's on Google Material, I guess.
Yes.
Material.
Dragon Chapter's version 2.
Yeah, iterative design. Yeah, spent a little bit of time working on that directory parser. There's probably something in Node that already does that too, but I didn't think to actually look for a library that does, like that would read the file system. All right, any other questions before I move on? Okay. So the next one that I worked on, this is kind of an older app. This was before I started working on the file syncing app, was the Metroidvania game. I've been working on for a while. Let's see. Try to get all the windows taken care of here. I'll just go ahead and do a demo of the game in progress. It takes a little while to kind of settle down. But this is a project I work on to kind of try to sync objects in a persistent world type thing, MMO. And then I was really into Symphony of the Night at the time, so I wanted to make a Metroidvania type game in JavaScript. So I used MelonJS for the engine, and then wrote a custom server for the multiplayer code. So you can see, like, if you're on the same machine, it's pretty fluid. The enemies sync pretty well. Like all the objects are pretty stateful in terms of being shared between the two game worlds. When you get into going over the internet, it's a little different story. And you have 100 milliseconds of latency. You start getting into interpolation of the objects and that sort of thing. And there's just not a whole lot out there for JavaScript right now that I was able to find. I looked through the Steam white papers on like the traditional model of how you're supposed to interpolate. And then you get into extrapolation and reading like, what is the latency like over 5 minutes or the session where you're able to make better decision. I got into the interpolation, but not really a whole lot more than that. So, and then also, I think might be able to do a third player too. These windows. Yeah. So at this point, this was after I refactored it and I'd refactored it and abstracted what the logic was like for the user positioning. So, geez, it's unwieldy. You should be able to have as many players going at one time as you want, whereas the server can handle. I think the question more is, can the server handle, 5 players or that sort of thing? Especially when you start getting on the internet, you're dealing with the latency and such. But so I was going to walk through some of the code on that, and I'm a little bit fuzzy on it because it's been a long time since I worked on it. But yeah, it's on MelonJS, and then here is the server that runs in NodeJS and Socket.io. and the constants of like, how often do we want the server to iterate? So right now it's updating every 50 milliseconds. It's sending out positions of all the objects in the game to the client. And then that affects the client based on what is the frame rate, what is the update rate of how you're doing the game plan. So that kind of has to be in harmony with one another. Here's the interval that actually emits that update objects event to the client. And it's just passing one big old array of socket objects. It has the positioning, it would have if they're dead or not, it would have, just any sort of information regarding the player. You have this is basically copied and pasted from a chat room app, stuff like this. When you leave, it should remove the player from the game and then update all the clients. In an earlier iteration, I was able to kind of get it synced to where one person could be on one map and the other person could be on another map, and they go to the next map, and then you would see each other, but then you move the other one, you'd be in a different place. You can see everything is very much like work in progress at this point, kind of trying things. I think this was responsible for the objects that were sent from the slave. It used a host. It used a model where one player was the host, and that player would be authoritative for all the positions of the object. So, like if you were to see an enemy, that enemy usually follows that player. So I wasn't able to get into the logic of, which player should this enemy follow? But yeah, the host would send out the positions as well as its own position, and then the slaves would read the object positions, and that's how everything would kind of show in terms of the enemies and power-ups and things like that. But then also the other players other than the host are sending their own positions as well. So there's probably a better model of doing this that I would like to research, but just kind of need to find some code and study it and go about it in a different way. There's also the model where things are more authoritatively sourced from the server, and the server is determining where the objects are and where the enemies are and that sort of thing. And that's probably the right way to go. So this is the code. It's kind of like the main handler for the client. And this is a loop that could definitely be broken out. That is reading the objects that are passed from the server on the interval that you define. So it's just doing things like, if things are dead, you remove them from the game. Looking for game entities against entities passed from the server. Creating new, you can also create new enemies or create new objects and things like that.
These days, it's better to use the request animation frame instead of like a set interval. So you get, that's typically how really interactive applications are written in JavaScript these days.
Then this is the class that extends any object that you want to be passed to the server. It has the interpolation of the objects here, basically just taking the buffered array of socket objects that were passed together, pushed to this tick socket objects, and then it takes 3 or 4 of them, and you just kind of do the math between the two positions. And that's kind of like the basic interpolation logic. There's a bunch of other stuff in here that I wrote that I couldn't probably describe to you what exactly they do. 'Cause I was like really knee deep in it at the time. Now I'm out of it, and it's just a lot of trouble to get back into it and try to wrap my head around it again.
So do you think you spent more time writing the game or the actual client to make the games communicate?
I spent more time on the client to make them communicate. I did, like when I was writing the game, that was fun, and it was a lot of learning how to use a sprite sheet, learning how to trigger animations based on events and things like that. So that took a good bit of time, and I was working on the socket code at the same time. But when I started to try to abstract it into its own library, which is in another repo other than this, that's what really started eating up my time, because there's not really a great way to debug that sort of thing as far as I know. You just, you're kind of flying blind. If you have an error, you can log it out, on your Node server. But I think I would need to spend some time writing some good debugging tools to take it any further, because it's just such a time waste of trying to get it right.
What kind of stuff, like abstractions, does MelonJS provide?
Well, you have like the object entity, which is one of the main entities in the framework. Yeah, let's see. Let you look through the source code a little bit. So yeah, they basically inherit from each other. You have a renderable entity. The object entity takes from, would assign it a unique ID. You do things like, is it collidable or not? Can you just walk through it or not? You can pass in configurations of what you want the sprite width and the sprite height to be, and that interacts with how your sprite sheet is actually sized. So there was a lot of time spent working with the artist who I was working with, trying to get the dimensions just right so that things didn't look weird as the animation went. And then you pick a frame at which, like, you might have a walk animation, and you might have, like an attacking animation. So you define those within the player object that would inherit from this base object entity, and then the socket object entity inherited from the object entity to kind of override some of those things and pass the network communication. And then the player entity would inherit from the socket object entity, which goes down 3 or 4 levels deep inheritance. But yeah, this was my first game, and it's a little more spaghetti codish than I would like it to be, but learn some good lessons from it. You have your update loop for each type of entity and that sort of thing.
So what did your interval loop do then? What was, when you showed that before?
Well, you have an interval loop for passing the network, the server information that comes back from the client. And then you also have another interval loop in the browser that's receiving that information or sending that information to the rest of the game. And then you have an update loop that is like, render this object every so often.
So that's the update loop is tied to the request animation frame, but the interval loop is actually sending data back to the server so it can update other parts.
Yeah, there's two of them. Two of them, yeah. And the main update loop for the engine, I think it does use that request animation. Yeah, I believe. Let me see if I can find that. And you have your main.js for MelonJS, where you define a lot of your resources, your audio that you're going to use, and And then in here, I think you can define what you want the frame rate to be. I think I have it running at 30 frames per second. I initially had it running at 60 frames per second, but it was just too slow on certain machines, which is kind of disappointing that browsers are still that slow. So I'd like to find an engine that's a little bit more performant, and it may be more performant now that they're in like, they must be in like 1.3 or 1.5 by this time.
You could probably get a better like response with WebGL.
Yeah.
This is
having
actually
a
hard
video
video
card, definitely.
I mean, like, does it not just run? I mean, and it interpolates based on like a time delta or something like that?
Yeah. If I could find the code really quickly, you can actually turn interpolation on and off in the main as well. You can, there's settings within like the main MelonJS.
Okay, so you can tell MelonJS, like, I want it to run a certain number of frames per second?
Yeah,
Or
you can.
just say, just run as fast as you can.
I don't know if you can tell it to run. I think it defaults to 60, or it defaults to some frames per second, but I guess you could have it run at, 9,999. I'm sure you could hack the code to do that if you wanted to. The thing that I liked about MelonJS is it was just very flexible. I worked with other engines, and it was kind of like they gave you a GUI and told you, you drop in things here and there, and it wasn't customizable. So in order to add the socket and the networking element to it, you really needed something where you could get into the code and mess around with it and extend things and do stuff like that. Any questions?
Just MelonJS ultimately translate into Canvas API calls, or do?
Yeah, I think in the HTML, yeah, it's just based on Canvas.
Is it strictly 2D?
Is MelonJS 2D? I think that you can use WebGL now. At the time, I want to say it was only within the what was the name of the editor? Tiled. They wanted you to use the Tiled editor, where it kind of looks like Mario Maker now, but way less intuitive. Where you drop in blocks and things like that. You would create entities of your player, and this is where the player would drop in from, or start the game and that sort of thing. Within Tiled, you could put your points of where the entrances and exits were in the game, and that sort of thing. I mean, it was okay, but I felt like, I don't know, there's probably some medium between being able to edit your code at a low level for something like this, and then also having a really nice editor where things make sense and you don't have to do a bunch of investigation into it.
How long did it take you?
For the entire thing?
Yeah.
Well, it was a learning process for me, and it was kind of my pet project, and I had a lot of free time at the time because I was living alone in New Jersey. So I would come home, and I kind of use it to learn JavaScript. It was probably like way too difficult of a project to learn JavaScript with. I didn't want to do like a blog application. I was like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do. So I mean, I would come home and spend 2 or 3 hours a night on it, or geek out over the weekend and spend 10 hours on it. So it would go way quicker now that I know how to use it. And your third game is probably going to exponentially go down in the amount of time.
Yeah, totally.
I would definitely look, if you're looking to make a game, I would look at MelonJS and the current state of it now, look at example projects, but also look around because there's a lot of other good HTML engines in Unity. That's really powerful, very well supported, lots of code out there that you can just copy and paste and modify to your own needs, which is kind of a good and a bad thing. But that's a lot of game development, as I found it, is just kind of modifying things that other people do, and then you come to an understanding of it and use it for your own purposes. Another mistake that I wish I hadn't made is trying to do too large of a game. It was way too large for one person. So if I do it again, I'll pick something way more manageable, way more of a smaller scope. thinking about doing like an online football Tecmo Bowl type thing, or like a punch out that would be multiplayer. But then also you get into situations where you have an emulator now in JavaScript, so why not just kind of pass the input along rather than doing all this, behind the scenes code? Why not just, send the keyboard, press it along, and then you share the screen of the game? I think that would be a much easier way to do it, save you a lot of time. But I'm not sure how latency would factor into that as well.
How did you structure your socket IO? If you could go back to the socket client,
Sure.
because I've struggled with just having one huge file of named events and then
One huge file of named events is how I did it, yeah. Well, I guess it's one huge file of named events. Okay, so up here, you're instantiating socket. You are defining how often the client should be looking for the objects that come in from the server. And then, the host is going to be the first player who joins the socket game. So that's just kind of like a namespace for host. And then the ID of the person who joined from the server will be assigned to the client. So every client, of course, knows its own ID, and that's used to transfer back and forth between the server and the client, identify whether it should be the host model or the client model, and kind of branch off into one of those paths. Then down here, you have like update objects. I believe that's the host path. It is reading the objects that come in from the server, pushing to the ticked socket objects, which is the interpolated snapshot in time. It has like 4 snapshots in time of all of the socket objects. So very heavy. Then here's if you wanted to add an object to the game, that would also come from the server. I can't remember really what that does. But then it would instantiate that type of entity that, like, from the server, the client who instantiated that object would send it to the server. Then the server would send it back to all the other clients. The clients would run this function. It would have the settings and the entity name of what type of, was it a monster? Was it a heart? What kind of object is it? And then it would instantiate it on their machine. Would assign an ID to it, so you're able to you don't recreate the same object over and over again. I had that problem a lot where 100 versions of the same thing would show up to you. Be defensive about things like that. And that's really all the listeners. There's not a whole lot of listeners that were needed, so I guess I didn't get to the point where I felt like I had to break it out into a bunch of files. I certainly would look at doing that now. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right.